Case 21. Beydoun versus Sessions. We find ourselves in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. Facts. Plaintiffs Nasser Beydoun and Maan Bazi each separately sued various federal government officials challenging their placement on the federal government's selectee list, which designates them for enhanced screening at the airport. Asserting that their Fifth Amendment right to due process was violated, plaintiffs sought declaratory and injunctive relief with the aim of having their names removed from the government's enhanced screening list. However, in both cases, the district court dismissed their complaints, and in Beydoun's case, determined that any amendment would be futile. Plaintiffs appealed, and the court consolidated the cases for purposes of oral argument, given the similarity of the facts and arguments presented in both cases. Plaintiff Nasser Beydoun is a U.S. citizen and resident of Dearborn, Michigan. According to his complaint, every time Beydoun attempts to board an airplane, he is subjected to excessive delays, secondary screening, being singled out at checkpoints, and being singled out for additional screening at the gate. As a result, Beydoun has missed countless flights. He also claims that he has been humiliated and that his business ventures have suffered because he is subjected to extra security measures. Plaintiff Maan Bazi, who is also a U.S. citizen, similarly claims that he is only allowed to board flights after undergoing additional screening and experiencing excessive delays. For example, when Bazi was flying from Brazil to Texas, he was subjected to extra screening for approximately 10 minutes after receiving a boarding pass and was told to wait as he was going to be the last person boarded on the flight. After arriving in Texas, Bazi underwent an additional hour of questioning and had his bags searched for explosives. Bazi also had his passport confiscated for an hour at the Las Vegas airport and was taken for additional screening that lasted 30 minutes. At least once, Bazi cancelled one of his planned trips in order to avoid the stress and embarrassment of extra screening. According to their complaints, Beydoun and Bazi have both attempted to use the procedure established by DHS TRIP to challenge their inclusion on the selectee list. However, each time, the government failed to remove them from the list and has only sent them generalized responses to their inquiries. In addition, in both cases, the government has neither confirmed nor denied that plaintiffs are on the selectee list. What's the issue? Whether the district court erred in construing their complaints as challenging the redress procedures available to have their names removed from the selectee list. Plaintiffs insist that they were not in fact claiming that the redress procedures violate the Fifth Amendment. Instead, they were challenging the inclusion of their names on the selectee list in the first place. And the second issue, whether the district court erred in determining that their alleged inclusion on the selectee list does not implicate a liberty interest protected by the Fifth Amendment. The holding. The court affirmed the judgments of the district court. And why? Let's first look at some terms. Declaratory relief refers to a binding judgment that establishes the rights and other legal relations of the parties, without providing for an ordering enforcement. Declaratory judgments are often sought, for example, by insurance companies in determining whether a policy covers a given insured or peril. Injunctive relief refers to a court order commanding or preventing an action. To get an injunction, the complainant must show that there is no plain, adequate, and complete remedy at law, and that an irreparable injury will result unless the relief is granted. The No-Fly List is a list created and maintained by the U.S. federal government's Terrorist Screening Center of people who are prohibited from boarding commercial aircraft for travel within, into, or out of the United States. The list has also been used to divert aircraft away from U.S. airspace that does not have start or end point destinations within the United States. The selectee list is a subset of the government's terrorist screening database. The terrorist screening database is developed and maintained by the TSC a multi-agency center that was created in 2003 and is administered by the FBI, which in turn is part of the Department of Justice. Officials from multiple agencies staff the TSC, including individuals from the FBI, DHS, the Department of State, Customs and Border Protection, and the TSA. As the court notes, TSC personnel decide whether to accept or reject the nomination of a person by the FBI or the National Counterterrorism Center to the TSDB, or the selectee list. TSC also decides whether to remove a name from the TSDB after it receives a redress request that has been submitted through DHS's Traveler Redress Inquiry Program, the DHS TRIP. Let's discuss what, according to the court, is the minimum type of government action necessary to implicate a fundamental right. The court states that a fundamental right will only be implicated by government action that at a minimum significantly interferes with the exercise of a fundamental right. Burdens that are incidental or negligible are insufficient to implicate the denial of the right to travel. At issue in this case is whether plaintiff's alleged placement on the selectee list created more than an incidental burden on their right to travel. The district court found that the instances alleged by plaintiffs did not rise to such a level as to implicate a constitutional right, and therefore that plaintiffs had failed to state a claim. Lastly, let's discuss whether plaintiffs' claims were based on procedural or substantive due process according to the court. And I'll let you take a moment to look at this. Substantive due process provides heightened protection against government interference with certain fundamental rights and liberty interests. The interests protected by substantive due process are, of course, much narrower than those protected by procedural due process. Indeed, substantive due process only protects those fundamental rights and liberties which are objectively deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition, and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty, such that neither liberty nor justice would exist if they were sacrificed. In order to adequately assert a substantive due process claim, a plaintiff generally must allege that a statute or government action burdens a fundamental right and cannot withstand strict scrutiny. The court here stated, because we find that plaintiffs have failed to adequately allege that their fundamental rights were violated, we affirm the judgments in both cases.